Who's the best grappler in the UFC? Who's the worst? Stick around because today I'm going to be doing a tier list for dangerous grapplers in the UFC. I'm Wyatt and this is Fight Society. Alrighty, so I'm going to be going from best to worst. All right, my S tier grapplers. Now, some of these people you might not agree with where I place them based on grappling skill, but some people are very talented grapplers that don't necessarily get that many finishes. They more use it as a positional tactic, they win a lot of decisions, which is why I have some of them a little bit lower. Now, first off, S tier. This might be a little bit of a layup in terms of an S tier grappler. We have heavyweight champion Jon Jones. Jon Jones is elite altogether, but specifically his wrestling and his grappling put him a step above the rest of the heavyweights, and it did for the light heavyweights as well. I have Jon Jones as an S tier grappler. Now, someone that you may not expect here because he doesn't have the most exciting fight style, but he is a very dominant grappler. He does get submissions, and that is welterweight contender Sean Brady. The way that he controlled Kelvin Gastelum in his last fight is very impressive. Most people cannot control elite welterweights like that. And I think Sean Brady, if he can keep a fight off of the feet, because he's not very good on the feet. We saw him get standing TKO'd by Belal Muhammad. I think if Sean Brady can consistently get takedowns and control, he is a future champion. Hot take from me, it might be, but that's what I think. Moving on from there, another S tier grappler that I have is Charles Oliveira. Former lightweight champion, the most submissions in UFC history. I think that kind of goes without saying. The most submissions in UFC history. S tier. I mean, I don't know what you want me to say. It's the most subs in UFC history. Charles Oliveira is one of the most dangerous grapplers of all time, if not the most dangerous grappler of all time. Now, some guys will be more positional, like Merab or Pantoja. They don't get a ton of subs. They control the fight on the ground, but they don't attack finishes. Charles Oliveira does just that, S-tier grappler. Moving on from there, someone that Charles Oliveira lost to, lightweight champion Islam Makhachev. Now, he is not just a threat on the ground, he's also a threat on the feet, but he has finishes on the ground over ranked lightweights. He finished Bobby Green with ease, finished Dan Hooker, and he also controls fights on the ground. The only person that gave him a real tough test in that department was Volkanovski in their first fight. In the second fight, it was just over too quick to see their grappling tested. But Volk took that fight on 11 days' notice. He was not training before he got the call for that fight. So I think that fight would have been too high-paced and too grueling on the ground for Volk to have the same success on the ground that he did in their first fight. Now, the very last person that I have as an S-tier grappler is Khamzat Chimaev. Pressure grappler, a lot of submissions, scary, scary guy to be in there with, submitted Kevin Holland, almost submitted Kamaru Usman, very quick subs in his early days as well. I would give his cardio like a D tier because he doesn't last long, but S-tier grappler, terrifying grappler, actually. I'd give his striking kind of C tier probably as well. There's a lot to be desired from Khamzat right now, but from a specifically grappling standpoint, he is S tier. We move on to the A tier. We have people that are very talented grapplers. Sometimes they get subs, sometimes they just control the fight, but also people that have been submitted or put themselves in bad spots with submission attempts. Someone like that is Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega is elite jiu-jitsu. He's had some of the most exciting finishes at featherweight. You know, his guillotine of Cub Swanson, for example, but he also has fumbled in Hail Mary, could have finished the fight submission type circumstances. I mean, could have got Volkanovski out of there twice, didn't finish it. He was beat up very badly, but A tier for him. Yair Rodriguez, he submitted Yair, but he also, I mean, I know it was an injury TKO, but he essentially got submitted by Yair on the UFC Long Island card in their first fight. Essentially losing by submission to Yair Rodriguez is not the best look for a elite jiu-jitsu practitioner like Brian Ortega. The next person that I have on here is Arman Tsarukyan. Now, he was able to control many of his fights on the ground. He doesn't have a ton of subs, but he has competed and controlled fights against people like Charles Oliveira. He won the fight against Oliveira at UFC 300 due to his grappling prowess and that he was able to protect himself in some very, very tough situations. He was not submitted by the guillotine in the first round. He did not get submitted by the Darce choke in the last round. Even though he does control a lot, he is not the most lethal grappler. He is a bitch and a half to deal with on the ground. Moving on from there, we have Brendan Allen, someone that has submitted some very good grapplers at middleweight. He beat Paul Craig. Even though he can stall on the ground at times, he is someone that chases the finish quite a bit. His jiu-jitsu is very good. Brendan Allen is an A-tier grappler, especially at middleweight where the grappling is not as high-paced, is not as elite as it is at 55, 45, things like that, or divisions like that. And I have him as an A tier. I think he's an elite grappler for the heavier weight classes. Moving down from there, we have B tier. Now, this is going to be fighters that do dominate fights with grappling, but they are not lethal grapplers that get submissions. First off, we have Merab Dvalishvili. Now, while he is somebody that is a very high-paced grappler, a very talented grappler, the guy doesn't finish takedowns. He beat Peter Yan with 37, I think, failed takedowns. He literally wins fights off of control against the fence with failed takedown attempts. He did look better against Henry Cejudo, but he is not a lethal grappler. He's a controlling grappler. He's not going to finish a fight. And he got submitted by Ricky Simone. And he's on EPO. So Merab Dvalishvili, in my opinion, Merab Dvalishvili is a B-tier grappler. And then you have from there Alexandre Pantoja. He is a great grappler. But as we saw in the Steve Erceg fight, as we saw in the Royval title defense, it is control grappling. Grind it out, camp out in half guard, and run out the clock with minimal damage, but control time. So I do give him some credit for that, but I don't give him credit for being a lethal grappler because he's not very lethal. I would have had this next fighter a little bit higher, but given his performance against a very weak grappler in Calvin Kattar at UFC 300, I have Aljo in the B tier. I have Aljamain Sterling, former bantamweight champion, now a featherweight. I have him in the B tier. I would have had him in the A tier, but sometimes he lacks a sense of urgency when it comes to his grappling. I felt like he could have submitted Calvin Kattar. The same way Pantoja camps out sometimes in control time, and that's why I have Aljo as a B-tier grappler as well. Very talented. I'm not saying he's a weak grappler. He's up there from a skill and experience standpoint with the A and S-tier grapplers, but he doesn't have the finishing instinct or the sense of urgency that the other guys do. Now, from there, I have Kamaru Usman, who is a great grappler, but he did get his back taken by Leon Edwards. He did get his back taken by Khamzat Chimaev. And when he was grappling, it was lay and pray or hold them up against the fence and stomp on their feet so he would control the fight. So he was frustratingly controlling, but not a lethal finish the fight type of grappler. Moving on from there, we have Colby Covington. Colby Covington is he's a great grappler, great wrestler, pressure wrestling, but he's a decision machine. His finishing instincts are not great. He's been submitted before, and he doesn't, and especially in the Leon fight, he rarely mixed his wrestling in. And then he got reversed and he got taken down in the 5th round of that fight, injury or not. Getting taken down by Leon as a kickboxer. Maybe I don't give Leon's grappling enough credit, but Colby is a B tier at this point because he has no sense of urgency. He's basically like high-paced Usman, where he's more double leg takedowns than hold him up against the fence. He actually finishes takedowns, but still high-paced grappling. From there, I have Paddy Pimblett, who you see right here behind my head. Paddy Pimblett is an elite grappler, and he does have finishing instincts, but considering that he spent almost the entire fight in top control on Tony Ferguson on a 7-fight losing streak in his 40s and looked extremely tired in the 3rd round and basically just controlling in Tony's guard, I can't have him any higher than this. I can't put him up there with like a Brian Ortega. And somebody else that I would also put in this B tier would be Mateusz Gamrot. I would for sure put Gamrot in here. Control grappler. Insane record. He's 24-2, but he is not a lethal grappler. He's very similar to Merab and Colby in the way that shoot takedowns and control time, camp out on top, but not dominate or submit. So moving on from there, C tier grappler. We have not Ryan Garcia, Yair Rodriguez. We have Yair Rodriguez as a C tier grappler. The reason that I have him here is because he's a dog shit grappler, but he did submit Josh Emmett to become interim champ. He did injure Brian Ortega in a submission, but then again, you know, he did get submitted. He has been submitted. He is kind of a quitter. Not gonna hate on him too much, but he is a quitter in fights. A lot of guys, submissions a lot of the time are not necessarily somebody getting caught the way that somebody gets caught by a KO. A lot of submissions are somebody is so tired, so discouraged that they find a way out of the fight. That's how I'll say it. A lot of them. If you're like a Charles Oliveira victim and you just get snatched up into a guillotine, or he catches you in a Darce choke in the middle of a grappling exchange, very different story. But Yair Rodriguez quits in fights, gets submitted. You know what? The only time that he actually caught somebody, like with a submission, was he got hurt by Josh Emmett, and Josh Emmett was too fired up to try to finish Yair, and he got caught in triangle, and he didn't even really try to fight it. He tapped almost immediately. That's my C tier, is Yair Rodriguez. Moving on from there, we have the D tier. Now, these are some of the worst grapplers in the UFC. First off, we have fan favorite but terrible grappler, Tai Tuivasa. As soon as the fight hits the ground with Tai Tuivasa, he loses. If he's on the feet, he's a dangerous guy. That's why he had success against someone like Ciryl Gane, where there's no threat of a takedown. Like his last fight with Marcin Tybura showed, as soon as the fight hits the ground, Tai Tuivasa does not know what to do. He gives up his back. The fight's over for Tai once he hits the ground. Now, from there, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who is not the worst at defending takedowns, but once the fight's on the ground, he's pretty much fucked. The fights, he's going to get controlled. He's been controlled to decisions many times. The Bilal fight, he got submitted by Shavkat. Basically, if he fights a wrestler, he's going to lose, most likely. Moving on from there, we have, this might be a controversial one, but Derrick Lewis. Now, he does have the infamous, or famous, I guess you could say, stand up strategy. But against elite grapplers like Jailton Almeida, that didn't work. He spent 5 rounds getting laid on his back. His lack of jiu-jitsu technique and experience is what has costed him in fights. He's lucky that he knocked out Curtis Blades, because I thought he was just going to get wrestled to a decision there. So, and then from there, very last one, D-tier grappler, even though he did give Khabib his toughest takedown test in the first round, Conor McGregor is a D-tier grappler. He's been submitted. He's had trouble getting to his feet before. His cardio massively affects his effort in the grappling department. Conor starts to fade in fights if he has to grapple. He is a stud against most strikers. He has defended takedowns very well. But as a whole, Conor is like allergic to grappling, in my opinion. We'll see how that turns out in the Michael Chandler fight, because, you know, Michael Chandler has like a negative fight IQ. So I think Michael Chandler is just going to come in throwing big, meaty, looping hooks and potentially get KO'd by Conor. I don't think Michael Chandler is going to shoot many takedowns, even though he should. But that's a fight IQ tier list type of conversation. And I'll make that video pretty soon, a fight IQ tier list. But here is my UFC grappling tier list. S tier, we have Khamzat, Sean Brady, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, and John Jones. A tier, we have Arman Tsarukyan, Brian Ortega, and Brendan Allen. B tier, we have Aljamain Sterling, Merab Dvalishvili, Alexandre Pantoja, Kamaru Usman, Paddy Pimblett, Colby Covington. C tier, we have Yair Rodriguez. And D tier, some of the worst grapplers in the UFC, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Derrick Lewis, Conor McGregor, Tai Tuivasa. All right, guys, let me know your thoughts down below. Would you have added somebody to one of these tiers? Do you think I have somebody in the wrong spot? Give me your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you want access to extra content aside from my regular videos, click the link in the description down below to become a channel member and get access to members-only live streams and other bonus perks. Or click the join button on our channel homepage. And if you're interested in some non-MMA content from me, check out my weekly podcast, the Hissyfit podcast, and check out my personal channel, Wyatt's World. I'll have them both linked in the description down below. Go watch this suggested video, and I'll see you next time.